morning, everybody. Thanks very much, David. For people who don't know me, my name is Annie Brown. I'm the Managing Director of the UK at Brand Finance. Today we're going to be talking about the trust dividend, and specifically I'm going to be talking about evidence that we've seen from the ranking we released this morning at 5 a.m, the UK250 most valuable brands of British origin. I think this quote summarises our point of view that David's just talked about quite neatly, that a lack of trust is your biggest expense. And as David said, the language that we use to talk about brands has changed. People talked about reputation, and now people are increasingly talking about trust. But brand has always been a shorthand for trust in consumers' mind, particularly with that System 1 thinking. But the market in which brands operate and the context has changed significantly. So before the internet, there wasn't as much information, people relied on word of mouth, and what brands needed to stand for to build trust was reliability and consistency in quality, both from a functional and emotional perspective. With what we call the social media era, where more people were participating in social media, there was a lot more transparency over full value chain and a lot more scrutiny over wider conduct of businesses. And that's where we see brands start to try and differentiate by building societal trust as well as functional and emotional. And now, as we operate in this AI era, there is a rapid change of information overload, and you can no longer take information that you see at face value. And that's where we see brands really try to build deep authenticity to be able to provide credibility against stakeholders that, for the most part, are quite skeptical about any information that they see now. And as well as these technological changes, brands are now also operating against a backdrop of growing complexity, uncertainty, and volatility due to mass displacement from resource constraints, climate change, global geopolitical conflict, AI being used for falsified imagery, cost of living crisis, lots of positive stories for a Thursday morning. And it gets more positive. Trust is widely believed to be at an all-time low, and it's at its lowest in a century, as well as these wider changes that I've just spoken about, particularly in the UK over the last century. The century has been punctuated by a series of scandals from leading institutions, from the government, and also from financial institutions. And all of these events have undermined confidence amongst the general public that institutions are there to look after them. Now, one key event that I've spoken about that isn't indicated on this slide is the mass popularization of generative AI, which many people believe has undermined trust. And that might be because the chart is generated by AI. So it's consolidating various different sources of information. So it's not a scientific line chart, but I think the general trend holds true, that trust is at an all-time low. And that's something that many smart people believe. But here's the twist. According to Edelman, businesses are now the most trusted institutions in the UK. Over half of people trust businesses. So trust in government and media has eroded, and the islands of trust that are left behind are held by businesses. So there's both responsibility and opportunity there for businesses. And what's interesting is that British businesses in particular are trusted, both at home and abroad. Globally, about 60% of people trust British businesses. And in the UK, nearly 70% of people trust British businesses versus 43% who trust foreign firms. So that suggests that being British is still a meaningful indicator and signal of trust. So today we've launched our UK250, the ranking of the most valuable brands of British origin. For the 10th year running, Shell is the most valuable brand of British origin. It's grown by 16% year on year, and it continues to stand for quality and stability in an increasingly volatile energy market. The fastest growing brand for the second year running is Revolut. It's more than tripled in brand value year on year, up to £5 billion, putting it into the top 20 most valuable brands of British origin. Many people will remember that earlier this year they secured their UK banking license after a prolonged mobilisation phase, and they're eyeing growth in international markets for propelling their growth. The strongest brand in our ranking this year is Rolls-Royce Aerospace and Defence. So it's truly the Rolls-Royce of British brands. And interestingly, the wider aerospace and defence industry this year has grown by over 40% in value, which signifies and signals the strategic importance of aerospace and defence and the government's moves to focus on investing in long-term contracts with British aerospace and defence companies. And finally, a brand that we're highlighting to watch is Lloyds. It's already grown by 23% to 2026, but since that growth, they've also launched, well, many of you will remember that a year and a half ago, they refreshed their visual identity from being the horse looking over its shoulder to facing forwards, and they dropped the name Bank to be just Lloyds. They also earlier this year rebranded Schroders Personal Wealth to Lloyds Wealth, and there are quite widespread rumours in the Financial Times about potential further consolidation of that portfolio. So a brand to watch moving forwards. But our ranking covers 250 brands, and something that we see looking across the full spectrum of brands is the importance of trust. Trusted brands outperform on growth and profitability. In terms of brand value growth, brands with the strongest trust in the UK have grown by, on average, 15% year on year, whereas those with the weakest trust have lost about 4% value year on year. We see a similar trend that's less dramatic in terms of their revenue growth, and also a similar trend in terms of their EBIT margin, their profitability, where more trusted brands are more profitable. So there seems to be some sort of relationship between trust and company performance. The way that we determine trust is based on market research that we conduct amongst the UK general public, and here's a selection of the most trusted brands according to that research. As you can see, they're from a wide variety of sectors. We've got airlines, household goods, Rolls-Royce Aerospace and Defence, retailers, and Octopus Energy, also reflecting that there's some challenger brands in here as well as more established heritage brands. But something that all of these brands have in common is their consistency. Most of these brands have committed to a consistent messaging over time. But when we evaluate brands and we say that Rolls-Royce Aerospace and Defence is the strongest brand, it's not just based on trust, it's based on their ability to generate a commercial impact. As David was talking about, our model is based in how can brands generate financial return for the businesses that they're used on. So when we evaluate how brands are perceived, we look at how they perform on three key things: knowledge, credibility, and appeal. If a brand can meet all three of those criteria, it has strong perceptions. And trust is sort of the common thread that runs through all three of those. It's supported by all three and also supports all three of those factors. And then we also consider how brands perform against three indicators of economic behavioural outcomes: selection, advocacy, and price acceptance. Selection is whether people consider and prefer your brand. Advocacy is whether they're willing to recommend it to their peers and are actively talking about that brand with their peers. And price acceptance is whether or not they feel that it's worth paying more for that brand. So we've looked at how trust impacts these three different economic choice and behaviour drivers, and it varies by category. In more commoditized sectors, trust primarily plays a role in driving volume, whereas in more differentiated sectors, with more varied offerings, more ability to provide different levels of service, more premium levels of service versus more budget levels of service, trust can drive both volume and price. And what's particularly interesting is the really strong role of trust, both in choice and price, in financial services and in technology. As well as the role of trust varying by category, brands also represent trust in different ways. And we see that our view is that there are three different types of attributes that can drive trust. At the baseline, functional attributes in terms of capability and ability to deliver on its promises. Emotional trust, so many brands choose to derive further value by building emotional trust about demonstrating that they care about and can empower their customers. And finally, many brands try to generate more value through societal attributes and demonstrating that they act with integrity. Let's bring that to life a little bit. A brand that we think is very good at building functional trust and focusing very much on functional trust rather than the other types of trust is Ryanair. Ryanair has grown by 17% year on year in brand value. It's now worth £2.6 billion. And they have built consistently a capability of being cheap and on time. And that's a proposition that many customers rely on. And it's something that they've done consistently since this marketing campaign from 2015.
Thank you for flying Ryanair. Last year, over 90% of our flights arrived on time. We hope you enjoyed yours, and we look forward to welcoming you on board again soon. Ryanair. Low fares, made simple.
So that's something that they've consistently been positioning themselves as. A brand that instead tries to build additional trust through emotional attributes is John Lewis. So they also meet the baseline functional trust in terms of quality, price matching, but they build emotional trust by creating a sense of care and belonging through their marketing activities. And interestingly, of the 3 case studies, this one is the fastest growing year on year with 37% growth. And I won't play them, but many of you will be familiar with the annual John Lewis Christmas ads where the creative execution varies each year. They use different visual assets, but one thing that runs a common thread through all of their campaigns is a sense of care, belonging, family and community. And then finally, a brand which tries to build societal trust attributes into its positioning is Octopus Energy. And Octopus Energy from day one was founded on the premise that there was a wider societal issue that they wanted to solve. So they were founded with the mission to provide cheap, clean energy to as many people as possible in an industry where they felt that consumers were being ripped off and being treated unfairly by incumbent players. And their brand value has grown 20% year on year. And as well as that being that societal attribute being built into their DNA, it's something that their CEO continues to reinforce in their communications.
Our mission is to drive the energy transition faster and cheaper than anyone expects.
The world urgently needs a sustainable energy system. At Octopus, we're working hard to make that happen. Our tentacles stretch through our energy and around the globe. It all starts with customers. We power millions of homes around the world with green energy, fair prices, and award-winning service.
I cut it short, but you can see many more videos on their YouTube channel of the CEO continuing to talk to consumers directly about how they're helping them through ongoing challenges and volatilities that they see in the market and how it affects them. So how does this all work, and how do we recommend that marketing leaders can make this work for them and their brand? So to generate a trust dividend, first diagnose your market and your category. So identify which are the drivers that matter most for your category, but also how trust generates return. Is it more in terms of volume, or is it more in terms of a price premium? Interpret that. Many of the brands in our UK250 don't just operate in the UK, they are global businesses, and therefore adapting what matters to the different places that you operate in, of course, is important. Application. Now this is, for example, Ryanair. This is where it's important to build on a genuine, unique value proposition that they have, that a brand has, and make it feel real. So if you're trying to position yourself as something, it has to also be real. And Ryanair can be credibly claiming that they have built functional trust by being on time and cheap every time consistently. Taking action isn't just about communicating these things. There's also other actions that can be taken. And so understanding all of the different touch points where stakeholders can connect with you on trust is the way to build trust. And we'll talk through one example of that. And of course, as with many things, this is an evolving process where we recommend that you measure whether your activities are working or not, and feed that into this ongoing process. But the key word is evolution, because as we've seen with all of these brands that are doing trust well, it's all about consistency. So rather than revolution, evolution matters to be able to build up trust with your customers. So taking inspiration more globally, one brand that we're all probably very familiar with is an American brand, is Microsoft. And Satya Nadella spoke about trust quite a lot. And what he said is that without trust, none of our progress is possible. And since he became CEO in 2014, the Microsoft brand value has grown by 800%, about 20% every year. And as we saw earlier, trust is incredibly important in the tech sector, both in driving choice as well as in driving price acceptance. And Microsoft is one of the most trusted global tech brands, and that's something that's actually improved for them year on year, so they're now the third most trusted global tech brands. And going back to the examples of actions that brands can take, something that Microsoft is really pioneering is standards of usage and safety around AI. So they have a 27-page internal document called the Microsoft Responsible AI Standard that all product developers need to refer to when building AI tools. And they're also actively investing in resources to work with regulators and other governments to make sure that AI is used responsibly globally.